Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Deep Cut Dive. We've got a very special show today. We're going to talk about Canada's finest, Rush, with Martin Popoff and Jack Toledano. We're all going to contribute 5 deep cuts to the cause here today. So good morning, guys. How you all doing today?
Yes, morning. Doing fine. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
So, TGIF. That's all I can say.
Right. It's Friday. We got baseball tonight, and we're talking about Rush here, right? So pretty exciting day, I think. So you know how it goes. We're going to pull out 5 songs deep into the Rush catalog. These are not the radio hits, not the mandatory concert staples, the greatest hits compilation tracks, all that sort of stuff. So for all of you like big time Rush fans, you're probably going to be like, I know all those songs. Well, we know that. These are for the folks who only know the Tom Sawyers and, Closer to the Heart and those, handful of songs that you hear everywhere that are played everywhere. So if you're a big time fan, pull out 5 tracks from their catalog and offer them up to your viewers in the comments section. That's what this is all about. So let's just have fun with this. So I'm going to have Mr. Canada himself kick us off. So Martin, give us your first selection. Very anxious to see what you guys have picked.
All right. So I have picked Beneath, Between, and Behind from this album. I looked at the first one. I couldn't really find anything that I felt, in my heart that I definitely want to champion. But this one, this is a really cool song because it's a heavy song. It's a proggy song. Apparently, it's the very first lyric Neil wrote for the band. And I went in a chronological reverse order when I was sorting these out. I was shocked to hear how high and powerful and aggressive Geddy is singing on this one. So that's really cool about it as well. But yeah, it's just a really cool. You can see this band like just blossoming before your eyes as this new kind of thing, this progressive metal, right? We've talked about it before, how basically they invented a new kind of genre. And so this goes way, way back to the beginning, 1975, early 1975. And you're seeing, with this song and with the likes of Anthem and whatever, the invention of progressive metal. And I think this is one people don't talk about too much because I always get the order of those 3 B words wrong. I have to look it up every single time. So no one talks about this song, I think, for that reason.
And I love in your book, Anthem, how you really talk about how much Rush took off as a band right when Neil joined the band, and specifically that album. And I think everything you just said now is very, very important. That's a very cool track. I was looking at that one as well. I was like thinking, I'm like, all right, I'm going to try real hard not to pick songs that I know these 2 guys are going to pick. And that was like at the top of my list. I'm like, so we'll see how it unfolds. All right, Jack, you're up.
Oh, okay. So, and people that are watching, I made a more concerted effort to try and be respectful to their entire catalog and not just pick their old stuff like I did for a few other bands like Skinner, Kiss. So this one I'm actually skipping to, I believe it's album number 5, Farewell to Kings, for Cinderella Man.
Nice.
Yeah, great song. I mean, how could you go wrong? I mean, you have Farewell to Kings, Xanadu, Closer to the Heart, oh, oops, wrong one. Cygnus X1. Yeah, I said it's closer to the heart.
Yeah, you did say
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So what's left? Another great song, Cinderella Man.
Yeah, and Martin, did they play that live much, but just basically on that tour? I mean, that's like it's such a great song, and people do talk about it, but it's not like that's not like one of the songs on the live albums, on the hits compilations. It's very strange.
I don't think so. I'm definitely not an expert on what was played live, how many times, right? I mean,
right.
But no, yeah, definitely it's a rarity for sure. It's definitely.
I will say this: I did cross-reference a lot of these songs against their live albums, just to try and pick songs that were not on them.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing Cinderella Man on any live album at all.
Right.
So I'm guessing that was not a live track because, a lot of that album was played live and, throughout their career, not necessarily just on that tour. So, all right, I really, when I do these, I really try to hit on all the eras. And I really wanted to pick something from the first album. And then, Martin kind of hit it on the head. It's like, when you look at the first album, I mean, they played these songs a lot, especially early on. and throughout the early part of their career. But I really wanted to pull one track from here, and I think the one kind of oddity from this album, which has a different flavor than some of the other songs, is Take a Friend. It's kind of like on this album, I mean, because a lot of this album is this big metallic, you know, kind of this like Zeppelin on steroids type of thing. But I think that Take a Friend almost has this kind of Skinner meets Zeppelin kind of like bluesy thing going on with some nice, you know, guitar work from Alex Lifeson. It's kind of rudimentary early Rush, but a really fun tune. And I did some research on it, and it was played very, very rarely back in the early days. In fact, I think they only did it like a handful of times and then kind of dropped from the set list forevermore. So that's my one dip back into the really, really, really early John Rutsey era.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I'm up, right?
You are.
Yep.
Okay. So I went with Circumstances from this one next. I also, you know, I went into the era too. I've got something from the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. But I had to pick Circumstances, absolutely. It's actually, yeah, 3:40 it says on here. It's a pretty short song. But I had to pick it because I actually often, when people ask me, I often say it's my favorite Rush song of all time. So I definitely had to pick it for that reason. And it is a deep enough track. I mean, obviously The Trees is more famous on this. La Via Strangiato, the instrumental, is more famous on this. I guess not so much the big massive, you know, Cygnus Hemispheres thing. But Circumstances is not really talked about a lot. And I really like it because it's got really cool, tricky drumming to it. The singing, again, it's still a pretty aggressive Getty at this point. It's got the little bit of French in it, and it's heavy. I mean, the way it starts out, I mean, that's really almost close to the heaviest we're going to hear Alex maybe ever again, I suppose. So yeah, it just really hits you right between the eyes when it starts off. But yeah, just a good rockin' tune from this one, and they keep it pretty short.
Yeah, that's almost kind of like, as weird as it may sound, that's almost like the kind of little break on that album from all the rest of the craziness that's happening on that album.
Yeah,
but when you single it out, like you just said, it really isn't, right? But compared to the rest of the stuff on that album, it's kind of like the more like kind of traditional heavy rock tune compared to the other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing about it that's kind of cool is I guess it's Neil talking about, you know, a little bit alluding to his time in London, that whole going there and trying to be a rock star and then it not working out, which is interesting. It reminds me a little bit of Pat Travers' Life in London, kind of the same thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
There and he had to leave, but so yeah, it's kind of cool that interesting period of Neil where he goes there and lives in abject poverty and gets a really crappy little job and just realizes there's a lot of good players over here and there's a lot of competition. And he comes back somewhat with his tail between his legs, right?
Better off going home, right? They all did it. Jimi Hendrix did it as well. So
yeah.
All right, Jack, what do you got?
Okay, so Martin already picked my number 2, so thankfully I had a couple of alternates.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
I'm gonna back up to the first album, and I'm glad you didn't pick it, Pete. I'm gonna go with "Hey Baby, It's 7:45."
Oh, in the mood, yeah.
I'm in the mood. That's my number 2, In the Mood. I just, you know, with Working Man and Finding My Way, I think that's just a gem on that album.
And again, a very different type of song for them. Like,
Yeah,
I don't think they ever did anything like that again, right? It's kind of like what Rush's little boogie rocker sort of, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And just the fact that Geddy Lee wrote that one himself. I mean, they did it was mostly collaboration of the 3 members of the band, but that was his tune.
Yep.
Yeah. Pretty sophisticated little riff to it too, right?
Yes.
It's a pretty neat riff and it's very catchy.
For the first, you know, you can tell the sound is a little raw, but I just love that riff. Yeah. It stands out. No question.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go to this album.
Okay.
Cool.
And when I did Rush Top 10 Songs show, whenever that was, a year ago or something like that, I picked this song. And there were a lot of people that are like, I can't believe that's like one of your favorite Rush songs. And I generally, when I do these deep cut dive shows, I try not to repeat what I picked in the top 10 song show. But I had to do this one because this is a perfect example of a deep cut that I think was only ever played live in its entirety, like maybe twice, based on the research I did. And that's the Necromancer. I mean, that's as deep as it gets. I'm sure that the casual Rush fan has not heard that song at all. They probably maybe know Lakeside Park and Bastille Day, but I guarantee you that someone who's only into like Tom Sawyer and, you know, those more popular radio tracks probably would have a hard time sitting through the Necromancer or seeing the length of like almost 13 minutes long and be like, oh my God, what's that all about? But trust me, it's a very, very cool tune. It's heavy, it's dark, it's proggy. This is not like easy listening Rush by any means, but I love this album. And again, I'm going to go back to Martin's book here. I really enjoyed reading the chapter on Caress of Steel and what a hard album this was for the band and how the record company hated it and nobody bought it, but yet it kind of signaled in that period of the band where their creative juices were flowing incredibly and how they basically said, you know what? Nobody bought it. It didn't sell. The record company hated it, but we're going to follow it up with a record just like it anyway, because that's what we want to do. And I think you got to give them a lot of credit for sticking to their guns throughout that whole period, 2112, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, of just going for it and the public eventually getting it. But it's a shame that that more people didn't go back to this album at the time. And I think you touched on that a lot in your book, and the guys talked about it a lot too with the interview segments. So the Necromancer,
So Pete, I have a question on that. And so I read about that as well, about Caress of Steel not really selling with the fans. How is it that the fans were much more receptive to 2112?
I'm going to let Martin take that question here because he might have a little more insight.
Well, you know, I would say that you know, Caress of Steel is a little thinly recorded, a little dark, a little opaque. You know, but I've always been one, you know, everybody says, oh, 2112 is way different, it's way better and all this stuff. I always consider Caress of Steel almost like the demo version of 2112. As Pete said, exactly. I think they made a similar record the second time around, but I think it just had a few more good truncated songs that you could just totally headbang to, like Passage to Bangkok, Something for Nothing, Temples of Syrinx, right? And you know, I mean, it had the pentagram, but basically, I think it's more or less they see that Rush is serious. They see that they're doing this more. They're not going away. They're touring hard. So I think they're just kind of making inroads and saying we're here to stay. And you know, frankly, Prague. I mean, the market was pretty friendly to Prague at this time. I mean, Prague was still pretty big. Jethro Tull's big. Yes is big. Genesis is coming up, right? So I just think that you know, all this stuff about the narrative about punk taking over and all that stuff is a little bit of a myth. I think the world was perfectly in tune to take this stuff. Styx is doing well, right? Kansas is doing well at this point. So yeah, I just think it's essentially, it's a better, more immediate album, sure, but it is sort of the same kind of thing. It's, you know, a whole half of the side is a concept album. It's not a complete concept album, right? But yeah, I think it's just like Rush is here to stay. We're going to give these guys a chance. It was great recording. Just a really good album.
And I think we really have to reiterate one of the things that Martin touched on. These guys were playing live everywhere. They were on every heavy tour with opening up for all the big bands. And that's how you sold records back in the day, right? And it's like Martin said, they were here to stay. They kept going back out there and they played all over creation here, especially here in North America. Yeah. And that's how you built up a following. That's how you got record sales back in the day. It's very different than how it's been working the last, like, you know, decade or two, you know, here in more recent times.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm up, right?
You are.
Yeah.
So we've got, here's
I love the Porcupine Tree shirt, Martin.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah. So I'm going with, off of Signals, I'm going with Analog Kid, which I just always have loved. It's heavy, it's fast, it's got a really whittly note dance Alex riff. I love the production on this album. I love the way the keyboards are dovetailed into it. I love the reggae part on it. Really, really great drum sound, really cool drum fills, like the falling off of a cliff drum fills that you sort of got out of Keith Moon at one point. But yeah, this is just a good racing. The melody, when the verse kicks in, you know, it's very different from the you know, the main intro riff kind kind of thing, and it just cruises along. You know, Rush is not known as a particularly grooving sort of band, but I just find this song really grooves. So it was always, you know, this is my favorite Rush album of all time, and I just like the fact that this is kind of a no nonsense, pretty heavy rocker on Signals.
So Jack's got this sly smile on his face. Like, I think Martin sneaked into my house last night and read my notes.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Sorry, Jack.
It's all right. I'm just gonna say this, guys. This is my last alternate.
Okay.
Because I had Analog Kid, but
You're good though. You can change on the fly. That's really good.
I never come that prepared. I never come.
I
that
did
prepared.
it for Zeppelin yesterday.
Okay,
so,
yeah. And Martin's done it with me before too. So yeah.
Okay. So I had Analog Kid on Signals. We're gonna back up one album. I originally wasn't gonna do anything off of Moving Pictures, but before I go into that, yes, Moving Pictures. I did see the tour in 2010 where they played that album in its entirety, and that was a blast. Great album, you know, great tour. I have a picture or two to share afterwards, but the song that I'm going to choose is from side 2, Vital Signs.
Cool. I almost went with that too.
Yeah. I thought about all of side 2 on that album, but I said, you know what? I am going to avoid Moving Pictures because I had a feeling one of you guys were going to pick something. Well, it's incredible how, and I don't know, maybe you guys feel the same way. You know, obviously I grew up with Moving Pictures. I mean, I liked Rush before that album, but that's the album that like really hooked me. But I remember as being a teenager, really loving side 1. That's the attention that everybody got. And, you know, I loved Witch Hunt. I still love Witch Hunt. It's one of my favorite songs. Yeah, cool picture. But I remember like back in the day, not really digging. Nice.
Yeah, very cool.
Not really digging Vital Signs much. And now I absolutely love it. And I think it's like one of the underrated gems on that album. It's and maybe because, you know, I ignored it so much early in the day, but that's a great choice. Great choice.
Well, you can't go wrong with any of the songs on side 2.
Absolutely.
But the funny thing, of course, is that 4 of their biggest songs of all time, like arguably 4 of their maybe 6 or 7 biggest songs ever are all of side 1.
Yeah.
And then all of side 2, there's not really a hit on side 2 at all, which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, my turn, right? Okay. I'm also going to go to Signals, and I'm going to go, excuse me, with Chemistry.
Yeah.
And another one of those songs that played on that tour and then dropped from the set list. I don't know if it's ever shown up again. This has got that big chorus, catchy hooks, lots of keyboards on this song. It's got that kind of like a Spirit of Radio little guitar thing in the beginning of the song from Alex, which is pretty cool. I don't know about you guys, but I always thought Chemistry had all the makings of a big hit that just was never chosen for that. Really, not released as a single, you know, and this is an album full of very accessible songs. And, you know, a couple songs did pretty well on the radio. But for me, Chemistry is like kind of like the hidden gem here that like should have been massive, and they just decided not to go that route. So kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'm up. Okay. So I am going to go with, where is my flat? Okay. So I don't have my copy handy here. Anyways, Cold Fire off of Counterparts. So I'm going to move into the 90s. My favorite album of theirs in the 90s. I find this record is the best recorded album, probably all through the 90s into the 2000s, and possibly even better than most of the 80s albums, although I really like the recording on Signals. But Counterparts is a big, heavy album. They got Kevin Shirley in there. He's cracking the whip a little bit, trying to make the guys heavier, making sure there's some bass on these records, which really did not take place on you know, Power Windows, Hold Your Fire, Presto, Roll the Bones. So this song is a really cool one because it's got a really crushing emotional lyric, but it's also pretty heavy, and I think the whole second half of it just completely rocks. And again, it really, really grooves. I mean, I don't know how much of a deep track it is. Pretty much everything on this is a deep track, but you know, Stick It Out and Nobody's Hero and Animate, I mean, those are probably the bigger songs on it. You know, this might be next, I suppose. But yeah, I just I like that transition between the kind of mellow melodic verse and then the pretty heavy chorus, just driving a really cool, you know, kind of ride cymbal work going on it. And yeah, just a neat lyric that takes a bunch of different examples of cold fire and the ring and it being cold and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought it was always like one of the more well put together songs with a really kind of emotional, passionate message on it, rather than kind of a scientific message, and heavy at the same time.
That's a great song, and I'm a big fan of that album. As we'll talk about in a minute.
And I'm thrilled that you gave me an in. You didn't pick my fourth.
Okay, excellent.
But it is from the same album, Counterparts. And from my homework last night, I went back and I watched you ranking the albums, Pete, for Rush. It was very good, of course. And you do mention this song, "Cut to the Chase." Hey, that's like the most unique and best, guitar song on that album. The bass is phenomenal. I just love how Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson are really tight in that song. It's really good.
So I'm going to go out of order because I think Jack stole my notes. So "Cut to the Chase" was my Counterpart selection.
Okay.
That's.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Hey, that happens, right? It's one of the heavier tracks on that album. I love how it like starts off kind of like proggy, and you got this playful vocal from Geddy, and then the big riffs kind of come in. I love the production on this album. I think Alex's guitar just sounds bigger than life. You got a little bit of organ on this song. It's got for me, like, "Cut to the Chase" is a great like driving in the car song. Turn back the moonroof, open up the windows, and just crank it up and cruise around with. But I think that whole very cool pick. I think the whole album is like that for me. I think I'm trying to remember where I ranked it back when I did the ranking show, but I think Counterparts is probably my favorite, like, post Signals, Grace Under Pressure album. Other than maybe the final one, I think that one's really good too. But definitely good return to form there. So back to Martin.
Cool. So we're on number 5, my last one, right? Okay, yep. So I'm going with Vapor Trail from Vapor Trails. I mean, basically this is my favorite album of theirs of the 2000s. Unfortunately, it has a very, passionate, important theme. I mean, this is Neil in grieving mode. And I really like this song because it's one of the more conservative, conventional songs on it. Again, a little bit like Cold Fire. It's got kind of a mellow verse situation to it. But I love the crescendo to the, in a Vapor Trail part, and then the sort of collapsing into jamminess. I always point to this one section that almost Alex sounds a little bit like Tony Iommi in it, where he just does this big down, like a big kind of dive bombing, really sort of emotional chord situation. But yeah, I just figure it's just I mean, I guess the big ones on here are maybe One Little Victory, Secret Touch, the singles, right? I mean, this is the title track, AirSat's title track. It's singular, Vapor Trail, right? Yeah, busy drumming on it. Just a really cool, passionate song that I think takes, the whole theme of the album and just, condenses it down into, like, this is what's going on in Neil's life right now.
So, Martin, I got a question for you. So this album has a little bit of a controversial history. They released the album with that original mix, which a lot of people absolutely hated. Then they remixed it, and most of those haters fell in love with the album for the first time, whatever. Have you heard both? Which one do you prefer?
Yeah, I think the remix is definitely better. It had a very frenzied, sort of distorted feel to it. I mean, this one always reminded me a little bit of the daring creativity of King Crimson in the red, blue, and yellow period, right? It just feels like that they're really going out on a limb and doing something pretty different here. And the construction of it was very, very different. They just rolled tape and captured stuff and then kind of like put things together. It was done over a long period of time. Obviously emotions were running high on it. Neil's wondering if he can even do this again. He was effectively retired, all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I found this record to be just super, super brave and odd and creative. I love the graphics of it, the front cover, the whole theme. The lyrics are devastating, right? So yeah, but yeah, I think the remix was a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one of those albums from that period that really holds up well now. You know, you listen to it today and you're like, yeah, you know what? That was actually a pretty special record, which at the time, maybe a lot of people weren't saying, partially due to that really harsh original mix, I think. But the warmthness of the album kind of really came out in the open with the remix, I thought.
Yeah.
So, all right, Jack, what do you got?
It's funny that we're talking about that because my last song is from Vapor Trails, and I actually like the dirty mix better.
There's a lot of people that thought that. Yeah, it's weird when you talk about productions and mixes and things like that. Yeah. Martin and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago about how people really hear things differently. I don't remember, Martin, when we were talking about a particular album that has a lot of mixed feelings from the fans. And Martin and I both had different opinions on the production of that album, just like everybody else does. So yeah, it's.
And literally, when you say hear things differently, that's what we were talking about. Like, I have had conversations with people where, you know, literally someone will go, there's no bass on that album. And then someone else will go, there's too much bass on that album. Like, literally hear things differently. I can't believe sometimes the discussions we have about productions. And I just sit back and go, wow, that is really bizarre that we're both saying these two completely contradictory things. So I really wonder about that. Yeah, it's odd.
You're gonna hear all different opinions, but I know, Pete, you had mentioned that Hotter Than Hell is your favorite Kiss album, and you love Redeemer of Souls by Priest. Those are two examples of very murky, heavy, distorted, bassy type albums. Well, Kiss is more, it's more like a garage sound, but
you know what? Those songs kind of scream for that type of production. I mean, I guessed it on a YouTube show last night, and that album came up, and the host of the show, we were talking about Hotter Than Hell, and he was like, you know, the production of Hotter Than Hell is absolutely awful. And I'm like, but you know, those first three Kiss albums are kind of like that, but it was okay. I don't know. I think the songs on Hotter Than Hell, it just makes sense. It kind of, the production fit the songs. But people,
I love it too. I think it's a great production. It's heavy like crazy. I mean, Dress to Kill obviously is a little more thinner, more pristine, right? And the Kiss album was well produced as well. You know, the first one, God love them, they did a good job. What is Kerner and Wise? Kerner and Wise, yeah. So, but and I love the way that all three of them are quite radically different productions. But I love hearing a radical production once in a while, and it's cool that Hotter Than Hell's like that.
But I know Redeemer of Souls got a lot of criticism because, it's murky production. But again,
I think it sounds fine.
Yeah, me too.
But then you listen to Firepower, it sounds totally different.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Priest is that I think Glenn Tipton stumbled upon this odd radical production technique on that Baptism of Fire album, and he basically used it on Nostradamus and to some extent on Redeemer of Souls, and then they got away from it. So he hears something that he really likes, and it is different, but I think it's used on all three of those albums.
Okay, so that being said, we digressed a bit. So I actually listened to this song both ways, the original mix and then the remix, Peaceable Kingdom. There's no question I like the original mix better. I love the dirty sound of the bass. The bass rhythm that Geddy Lee's playing has a bit of a grungy feel to it. And it's a good song regardless, right? I mean, it's a perfect deep track from that album. And me, I'm not as hung up on lyrics. For me, it's more about the music. And I thought that was one of the best songs on that album. So. Good one. Good one.
I think it's very cool that you guys picked some songs from that album, because I think that it's a kind of an underappreciated album to the more casual fans, as is a lot of their latter catalog. So, all right. So my final pick, I'm going a little out of order here because I wanted to throw the counterparts thing out there. So I wanted to pick a song that kind of went back to a conversation that Martin and I had a couple weeks ago about Alex kind of incorporating some kind of like Andy Summers policey things into the music of the band in the 80s. And I think one of the first instances we saw of that was on The Enemy Within from Grace Under Pressure. which I think kind of has that sort of like pseudo reggae police thing going on, but I think it really works here. They filmed a video for this particular song and played it live on the tour, but never released as a single and kind of like disappeared from their set list, not on any of the compilation albums, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's just got tons of hooks. It's got that really kind of crisp, reggae type guitar work, the tricky drum patterns from Neil. I think it's absolutely terrific, engaging song, and one of those songs that on an album, for me anyway, that has really grown to be an absolute favorite of mine from the band. I wouldn't say it's my top 5 or whatever, but back in the 80s I was kind of like hit or miss on this album, but I think this album holds up pretty well, and I think this and Signals kind of go hand in hand, and I don't know, just a terrific song on a terrific album.
Cool. Awesome. Neat.
So there we have it. 15 deep tracks from Rush. I mean, we could easily do a part 2 because, we had some other albums we didn't even touch on that obviously probably the casual fans don't even know, but I think this is a good start. Like our Blue Oyster Cult show, Martin, we could probably do a part 2 of this one at some point.
Did you want any honorable mentions?
Go for it. We got a few minutes. Go for it.
Okay, so I had put down Natural Science. I had put down Witch Hunt and Camera Eye, and Vital Signs. Losing It, I don't know. Is that a deep track off of Signals? It's one of my favorites of all time. After Image, about Robbie Whelan dying, right? Engineer, the studio, kind of driving song, very, very emotional. Something for Nothing. I don't know. Is that a deep track? And the title track from A Farewell to Kings. I don't know how deep that is, but that one I always considered really, really similar to Circumstances. Just a cool, heavy sort of song, one of the shorter ones on these 2 records that are very similar. So those are my deep tracks.
Farewell to Kings is interesting because, they went and they performed that on Don Kirshner's rock concert back in, the year that album came out. I think they played it a bit on the tour, but I always thought that would be a song that would be forever in the set list of Rush for decades. And it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never understood that. Great song. I absolutely love Farewell to Kings.
They have so much material. You can only fit so much. And
yeah, give them a lot of credit for, throughout their career, they would always kind of, a lot of the gems from the catalog would resurface in various tours and live shows and things like that. They were always very good about that. So
they left no stone unearthed, basically. When they're doing this an evening with Rush thing and playing whatever it is, 2.5 to 3 hours, and eventually, and all the full album stuff that happened and all the live albums. So this is a band that eventually went deep and brought it all back, right? They were there to please the fans. They're nerdy music fans themselves. They know that's what Rush fans want to see. They want all these songs trotted out, right?
Yep. So Martin, I keep seeing these like posts here and there of people screaming for the 2 surviving guys to get back together and grab someone like Mike Portnoy and make it all happen again. You think that's ever gonna happen?
Yeah, I don't know. It's similar to that Zeppelin thing when it's like they did Page Plant, but they didn't bring John Paul Jones back because it would be too much like Led Zeppelin. And I kind of feel like this would be sort of the same thing. I think they probably both have still a lot of music in them left. Definitely you don't want to call it Rush. This is a situation where it would be kind of cool for them, as the 2 of them to form a band with one other guy, right? And then call it a whole different thing and make it like a whole different thing. So sure, and they're both capable of doing solo albums as well. But it is kind of funny. We're just not really getting music out of them, right? Maybe it's because they're too much Renaissance men, right? They have too many other interests in their lives. And it's almost like that Bill Bruford retiring thing. It's like, you know what? I'm retiring. Tim Bogert said the same thing, right?
Yeah.
He said, you know what? I'm retiring, just like a normal person, getting off the job with his gold watch. I'm quitting. So maybe there's a little bit of that going on with them as well, that they say, you know what, we've done enough.
Yeah, and they certainly don't need the money.
No.
I just get the impression based on like interviews I've seen and read that I think the guy who's going to break first is Geddy. I think Geddy is probably itching to do something. I don't get that as much with Alex. I think Alex would be good, guesting on other people's albums and tossing in a solo here or there, whatever. But you got to wonder, because it's been now, geez, when was that last tour? That's now what, 5 years ago, 4 years ago? When was that? 2016? So we'll see.
I could see Geddy doing a solo album. And as for them getting together with somebody like Mike Portnoy, the drums would be great, but you'd be missing that lyrical element that Neil brought to the band.
Yeah. Well, we'll
Yeah.
see. Time will
Gavin
tell.
Harrison from this band. I mean, Alex, Alex did guest with Porcupine Tree, right?
Yeah, he did.
Porcupine Tree is a funny situation. Like when I heard Porcupine Tree and those albums, especially Fear of a Blank Planet, I mean, is just like one of the masterpieces of all time, and that's the
Dead
one.
Wing, and so many great
You
albums.
almost wonder, because I feel this with a lot of bands. You almost wonder if Geddy, Neil, and Alex looked at each other and said, "You know what? We've been absolutely lapped by a band like this." You know, the playing on there is, I often look at some of these progressive metal albums of later years, and this happens in heavy metal too. But you look at them and go, in the first minute of this drum performance, everything Gavin does is way more complicated than everything across the entire Rush catalog, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing happens, right? And the songwriting and the lyrics and everything. And you just look at something like that and go, you know what? The old guys can be lapped. They can't, there could be records that are bands or whatever that are way better than the old guys. And like Porcupine Tree was kind of like that, but give them credit, right? It's pretty interesting that, at their peak, when they were going to be bigger and bigger, Steven Wilson goes away, becomes a solo artist and does amazing as a solo artist. He's like a cult figure, like a Devin Townsend now, right?
He is, yeah.
So, it's pretty wild that catalog just gets chopped off and he goes off and does his own thing.
Just like that, right? So, yeah. All right, we're almost out of time. So everybody make sure you visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube. Jack.
All the damn time.
There you go. Thank you. So make sure you check out Martin's book, Anthem, Rush in the 70s. He's got the 80s one coming out. When's that coming out, Martin?
October, November.
Okay, so that'll be here before you know it. So make sure you get your orders in on Martin's website when that's being released. And we'll see you guys over the weekend. Lots of stuff happening this weekend. Brian Slagle's coming on the show tomorrow. We're going to rank the catalog of Cirith Ungol. That's happening tomorrow afternoon. Lots of things happening this weekend as well, so you don't want to miss it. So thanks to Jack and Martin. I am Pete Pardo. Goodbye, everybody.
Awesome.
Have a good one.